What's up everyone? Welcome back to Drive Theory. Today we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion about this Evo 4 behind me. So, I recognize it's been a while now since the last video, and the reason for that is because I've been doing a little bit of soul searching on this particular project, and the reality is I've just been running into issue after issue of fitment of various things I've ordered. This is kind of to be expected when you have a new platform to the United States. There's a lot of things that other countries have figured out that we haven't yet. And while that information is readily available online, sometimes it's not the easiest thing to find or access or whatever. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about first was this here intercooler. So if you remember from a previous video, we had installed the upper and lower intercooler piping from a company called STM here in the United States that was advertised as working for the Evo 4, 5, and 6. There was some fine print on this particular products that specified that it was designed to work for this particular intercooler made by STM, and the fitment of the factory intercooler was not guaranteed. And if you remember from those videos, towards the end of one of them, I realized this and noticed I made a mistake when ordering these particular products, and that was totally on me, not a fault of STM at all. And then I set out to order this intercooler as a way to remedy that solution. The intercooler came in, and the video I was going to make was actually about this intercooler because it is a very solid and well-constructed intercooler. The problem is that on this particular product page, it mentioned there might have been some slight modifications to the power steering lines on the Evo 4 that would be necessary to install this, which I thought, no big deal, I could bend those lines, not a problem. What did turn out to be a problem, and what was not advertised, is that this particular intercooler does not fit on the Evo 4 GSR, not because of the power steering lines, those can be remedied pretty easily, but specifically because of the fan on the AC condenser is actually completely in the way. And unless I just ditch AC entirely, which is not an option for this build, this intercooler will not fit. I've been in contact with STM about this, and the reasoning for this, which understandably actually kind of makes sense, is that, until recently, the Evo 4, 5, and 6 platform was not legal to import in the United States. There were a few here and there that got in through some loopholes in the law, but for the most part, they were few and far between. So the only car they actually had access to as a test bed for their products was a very heavily modified Evo 5, and I'm not sure this, but I believe that was actually an RS Evo as well, because it was definitely built for a race car. And that particular car did not have either AC or power steering. So I understand where they came from that. I wish they would have been a little more upfront with this than just saying the power steering lines and been clear that they really don't know if this will fit or not. But yeah, so if you're looking to get an intercooler for the Evo 4, 5, and 6, there are other options out there that do fit. Unfortunately, as far as I know, the only American company that makes one that will fit is ETS, which is also a pretty big name in the Evo community. So with that out of the way, I had to do a little bit of research and decide whether I wanted to continue to try to make these existing intercooler piping fit with the factory intercooler, because in reality, I don't need an intercooler this large. I mean, this is a 3.5-inch core. That's far larger than anything I will ever need for this build. The factory intercooler is good for something like 350 wheel horsepower, something like that, which is more than, I'm only going for 300 maybe wheel horsepower for now, so I don't really need a larger intercooler to begin with. So I was deciding whether I wanted to go with something else, like the HKS intercooler kit that isn't really designed for speed density, but would be a nice upgrade for the factory MAF setup. Or if I wanted to try to figure out some other way to make this work, or if I just wanted to buy some other kit from like Plasma Man or Ross Sport that is designed to work with the factory intercooler, but comes from the UK or Australia or whatever. After looking into all these options, I realized that the cheapest route for me was actually to try to make the existing intercooler piping fit. So I think the first thing we should touch on here is that while I chose this route, this is likely not the best route for other people to go. If I were to do this again from scratch, honestly, what I would have done was go with the HKS front mount intercooler piping kit. I don't know if you want the intercooler as well, you could do that, but I just needed the piping. And along with that, I would have went with the HKS intake, which I already had, and then to top it off, I would have gone with the Turbo Smart. I think it's called like the compact dual port blow-off valve or bypass valve. It's kind of like a hybrid bypass valve, which you get the benefits of recirculation, but it also kind of vents some of the air to atmosphere, so you get the cool sound that everyone's after. If I were to do it again, that's the route I would take. The whole setup would have only cost about $1,200, and it would have been direct bolt on. Nothing else would have needed to be modified, and it's proven, verified to fit. This is actually the setup Adam LZ had at the beginning on his build, his Evo 5 build, before he went full race car on it. So it's known to work. It's proven. It's reliable. But rather than spend $1,200 to buy a whole new setup and then figure out how to sell a setup that nobody's going to want anyway because it doesn't work in the first place, I decided to see if I can make what I have work. So first of all, let's take a look at the upper intercooler piping, because there was some success there. So what we have here is the STM upper intercooler piping with the teal or tile, however you pronounce it, venting blow-off valve. And the big, I shared a photo on Instagram, and I'll try to remember to put it up here as well, but the problem is that this intercooler pipe stops at about here, and the entry to the intake is about here. The end of it is about here. The reason this is like this is because if you noticed on the STM intercooler, the inlet and outlets of the intercooler were actually angled. So this is why this doesn't come in straight like that. It stops at an angle here. So I kind of experimented with a few different coupler sizes. I bought a 45 degree, a 30 degree, and a 15 degree elbow. And the 30 degree actually fit perfectly. It did require a bit of cutting the size because it was a lot longer than I needed, but it actually worked out fine. So if you are in the unfortunate position that I am, and you did buy this without doing as much research as you probably should have, which is my fault, obviously, you can actually use a 30 degree coupler to make this upper intercore piping fit fine. The one thing I am a little bit concerned about, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it with this intake in here, but let's take a look. It's kind of hard to see down there, but if you see, there's this nipple on this linkage here, and it touches right up against the clamp for the upper intercore piping. I don't know if this is going to be an issue. I'm going to have to keep an eye on this and see what happens over time. But if it is an issue, I may have to think of something else here. But for now, I'm happy with it. I did get that working. It's going to stay as it is. One nice thing about the STM upper intercore piping that I have not seen on any other aftermarket upper intercore piping on the market at all, whether from United States, Australia, UK, Japan, nothing, is that it does come out of the box with an IAT bung welded in. If you're going speed density, you know that an external IAT sensor, intake air temperature sensor, is an absolute requirement for tuning. If you were to buy any other upper intake piping kit, you would have to get that bung welded in, which isn't hard, right? Any fab shop should be able to do that as long as you have the bung and you're good to go. But keep in mind, that is a benefit of this particular kit. Am I saying you should go out and buy this kit just because of that? Probably not. But if that is something you're concerned about, maybe you don't have a fab shop near you, this might be a viable option to make that work. One other thing you'll notice is that with this upper intercooler piping kit, we did have to relocate the battery back to where it would be on like an Evo 8 or 9 or 7 even. And we had to put the intake where the battery used to be. This is kind of how the setup is on the Evo 7, 8, 9, and this is kind of how most stuff you're going to find in the US kind of expects things, because it's the stuff we had over here, right? STM does provide a small battery kit to make that work. If you take a look here, you'll notice there's like a aluminum battery tray, and I think they give a couple options for the battery. I want the Genesis because I had the better cold cranking amperage, and living up here in Washington, that's something I particularly care about, but it was the more expensive option. If that's not something you care about, the other battery is just as good. And I actually prefer this setup. This setup does open up a lot of space in the engine bay. So I'm actually ultimately happy I ended up going this route. The one downside here is, and this is something I'm working with STM with right now, is that this particular battery tray, and I wish I had the battery out of here right now to better show you, but there is a bolt right here that goes into the chassis, and there is a bolt back here that bolts into the shock tower area. When one of those bolts is in, the other bolt does not reach. It doesn't quite reach. It's like, I don't know, maybe a couple centimeters off, maybe if that. It's like, for instance, if you have the rear bolted in like I have right now, and you look down the hole of the front bolt, about half of the bolt hole is aligned with the hole in the battery tray. Obviously, it's not good because it's not the most stable thing in the world, and you don't want your battery to go flying anywhere under hard braking or anything on the track. So I'm working with STM to see if I get something resolved there. If they can't do anything about it, I may have to have something custom fabbed up. Not a big deal. It's a fairly simple piece of metal, so not super concerned with it, but it is something to keep in mind. I don't know if it's something specific to this one unit or if it's a fundamental flaw in the design of the product. I'll keep you updated as I find that out. But the good news is that with this setup, an Evo 8 intake actually works perfectly with it. This is STM's Evo 8 intake. But any intake design, speed density specifically intake design for the Evo 8 will fit perfectly fine. I'll probably swap this out with an HKS filter because this one doesn't particularly match the setup I'm going for. And also all these couplers are getting replaced with blue couplers because this valve cover is going to be powder coated blue, and that's kind of the vibe I'm going for. But yeah, so you can see that. One unfortunate bit though, on this other side of the setup is down here. If you notice, there's something missing from this whole equation, and that is the lower intercooler pipe. And that is because no matter what I did, I was completely unable to make the STM lower intercooler pipe fit with the factory intercooler. The reason for this is because the intercooler piping actually comes out at an angle like this, and then has a 90-degree coupler off of that goes out here. Of course, when your outlet of the intercooler is angled inward like this, well, that 90 degree ends up lining up great. But when your intercooler is directly out, that 90 degrees is all of a sudden too much. And of course, you don't want to bend it in because that'll kink, and you don't want your air kinking in there. And I don't know if there's like a shorter degree coupler I could make, but that doesn't seem like ideal either. So I'm working with STM on that and the upper intercooler piping to see if they can revise the design as an option to make them fit the factory intercooler, because it should be fairly easy. Obviously, with the upper intercooler piping, as I mentioned, the all you really need is a 30-degree coupler, so they could just offer that as an option. For the lower intercooler piping, one thing you could do, I think, is instead of having the pipe come out at an angle, you could have it, you could weld on like one, maybe two pie cuts on the end of it so that it comes out straight, and then that 90-degree coupler would line up perfectly. I'm also kind of seeing if there's a way they can make it to maybe fit both at the same time without having to have two separate designs, but we'll see what that comes out to. So with all the good and the bad out of the way, let's talk about some other just mods I did while I was dealing with all this prototyping. We'd already mentioned that I went with the tile blow-off valve. I am sticking with the internal turbo wastegate for the factory turbo. I'll maybe upgrade the turbo in the future, but for now the factory is all I need. I also have this Grimspeed boost controller, and it's mounted here where the SAS system used to mount, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But you'll notice right here I have this little breather filter on the valve cover, and the reason for that is because now that the valve cover no longer goes into the intake here like it would on a factory setup or a setup designed to bolt in directly, there needs to be some kind of ventilation for the crankcase. So this is a K&N, I believe, filter, and it was like $20, $25, something like that. And I'll put the part number description, but it's literally just slides on and you clamp it down, it's good to go. You could honestly, even if you had the factory intake, you could do the same thing, and you could cap off the port on the intake, and that would clean up a little bit in the engine bay. The Grimspeed, you can't really see it down here because the intake's in the way, but the Grimspeed boost controller is set up really easily as well. You just plug this hose into the compressor, the turbo compressor, and you plug this one into the wastegate actuator, and you can adjust it, the boost, with this knob here. The other thing you have to keep in mind, and you won't be able to see it back here with the battery in there, but there is a hose that runs from the intake back to the factory boost solenoid. You could either remove the boost solenoid completely at this point, because we're using the manual boost controller here instead, or you can just remove the vacuum line and just let the boost control solenoid sit there. There's actually 2 vacuum lines that you can remove. But the other thing you'll notice is, in order to make the small battery kit fit here, we had to remove the charcoal canister. And to do that, it was, unlike the Evo 8.9, it's actually really easy to do. You just remove the bracket with 2 12mm bolts, and then there are 2 lines that went to the charcoal canister. You just cut them down and point them downwards so that you don't get fumes in your car, and you are good to go. The final thing that I did, and this is kind of the final piece of the puzzle for this, because this particular upper intercooler piping does not have a port for the secondary air system, or the SAS, which is basically a factory anti-lag system, which sounds awesome on paper. Unfortunately, in the factory tune, it's completely disabled, so it doesn't actually do anything, from the research I've done at least. And the reason for that is, the reason they have it in the car at all is because, as this is a homologation car for Rally and Group A and all that stuff, they're required by, rules for the sanctioned rules for those leagues, I guess, to have all of the stuff they use on the production car as well. You can actually turn this on with a proper tune, but it's honestly, I don't feel like I need it. Like, modern tuning capabilities today have progressed a lot more, and I feel like, and modern turbos have gotten a lot better. So I feel like if you just either get a better tune or replace the factory turbo with something more efficient, you kind of gain the benefits there anyway without having to have the extra complexity of the engine bay, and you can kind of clean things up a bit. So let's take a look what this thing looks like. So this is really all it is right here. It's this pipe here is what usually has a hose that goes into the upper intercooler piping. This bolts into the side of the block, which you don't really have to cap those holes off. They're not actually holes in the block, they're just screw holes. And these, on the other hand, these go onto the factory exhaust manifold. In fact, if you replace your exhaust manifold, you'll probably have to take this off anyway, because I don't know if I don't know if the FP manifold has or not, but as far as I know, none of the aftermarket manifolds have provisions for this. When you do remove the SAS system, it will leave these 2 giant ports here in the exhaust manifold, which you do need to plug. These are fairly large bolts. I haven't confirmed this yet, but from the research I've done, it seems that the drain plug for the gear oil on Ford vehicles actually fits perfectly for this. And this is what people in like UK recommend when they remove there, because removing this is actually extremely common, as you would expect. So I'm gonna try to hit up O'Reilly's here in the next few days to see if I can source some of these bolts and see if they actually match up. If not, I'm gonna have to go to the Ford dealer for that, but I'm confident that'll work, because enough people online have suggested it that it seems like it's the right way to go. And it's just to hold me over until I can get an upgraded exhaust manifold anyway, so I'm not super concerned with the longevity of it or anything. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the build right now. So what's left here? Well, first of all, as you would expect, we need lower intercooler piping. I tried to order a lower intercooler piping kit from Ross Sport. Thank God they emailed me and let me know that this particular kit, despite what the description says, does not fit with the factory intercooler. So I refunded that order and did a little more research and asked some people online what they would go with. A lot of people from Canada who have been modding these things for 10 years now have suggested I go with the Plaza Man kit. The benefit of this kit is not only does it work with the factory intercooler and the factory J-pipe on the turbo, but it actually comes with an upgraded, better J-pipe for the turbo, which I can use down the line when I do remove the turbo and upgrade it or whatever I choose to do there. So that's awesome. And it's actually cheaper than both the STM and the Ross Sport kit shipped, despite coming all the way from Australia. So freaking cool there. So hopefully that gets here in the next couple weeks. I mean, Australian shipping, in my experience, isn't the quickest thing in the world. In addition to that, I'm going to be taking off the valve cover to get powder coated, and I also have a number of other engine bay dress up things coming to make this look a lot cleaner. And of course, I want to actually spend some time scrubbing down this engine bay because it is quite dirty as it is. As you can see, it's not the nicest thing in the world. There's a lot of dirt around everywhere. So do a nice little detail of that, and then I'll get this thing looking minty fresh. There is some other cleanup in the engine bay, like I have to remove a number of vacuum lines that are no longer used and cap some stuff off, and there's some things I want to some vacuum lines I want to reroute and whatnot to clean things up a bit, but easy stuff. Lastly, I need to install the Haltech ECU, which should be fairly easy. With the Evo 4 jumper harness, it should be pretty plug and play. Speaking of the Haltech ECU, there's something really cool about this. So I mentioned earlier that we needed an IAT sensor for the tuning. Well, that IAT sensor is, you're not going to be able to see it because it's actually under this pipe here, and I don't know if I can get a good visual on it, but it's down here. And since the MAF has actually has provisioning for an internal IAT sensor, the MAF sensor, it's already wired into the car's electrical harness to support an IAT sensor. So there's a company called Spooling Up, owned by a guy named Matt. And I'll put the link in the description, but he makes a harness that basically takes a GM style IAT sensor, and actually you can actually buy the sensor from him as well if you want, but it takes the two wires, the signal and the ground from the IAT sensor, feeds them into a clip that matches with the factory MAF sensor clip, and has the two wires there as well in the correct pin out. So with that, I don't need to do any extra wiring myself. It's all just plug and play, which is awesome because, I mean, I can do wiring, but I really don't enjoy doing it. And I am out of focus, going crazy right now. So after ECU's in, the tune comes, this stage of the build will be over, and I cannot wait to share what the next stage is going to be because it is going to be awesome. So stay tuned for that. I know this was a slightly different video. There wasn't any wrenching or building or anything involved in this. It was more of just a discussion. I thought I would level with you guys and explain why there's been a lack of content, what I've been going through, and hopefully this information is useful to you all who are getting your Evo 4s here in the States and might not have thought to do the research from other countries like I did, right? And help prevent you from going down the same woes I did. So drop a like on this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you like the stuff you're seeing here. It really helps me out. We are growing at a slow but steady pace, and I'm happy with that. I've been reaching out on other social medias as well, so hopefully we can continue to grow. If we can get to 100 subscribers soon, that'll unlock a lot of features of YouTube that'll help us grow even quicker. So any subs are really appreciated. Until next time, keep wrenching.